I was once possessed by a soul. I witnessed her effortlessly break free from her wretched family of origin and ascend to stardom as a beloved female icon. Moreover, she resided with the man I had yearned for in my dreams. I had assumed that my life would conclude as a mere onlooker. Unexpectedly one day, I awakened. 1. My affection for Qiao Yuan has endured since childhood and remains unwavering. However, prior to turning 18, regardless of my attempts to ingratiate myself with him, he never deigned to cast a direct glance my way, not even once. Once, I summoned the courage to forego breakfast for several consecutive days and scrimped to buy him heart-shaped chocolates. He didn't partake of any of the chocolates. Instead, he casually tossed them to the ground, where they were pulverized by my classmates who jeered at me. Subsequently, I retrieved the chocolate fragments and painstakingly glued them together bit by bit at home. At the age of 18, she commandeered my body, and I was consigned to the recesses of my consciousness. I have no inkling of her identity, yet her excellence is truly extraordinary. She deftly captured Qiao Yuan's heart on my behalf. I had made no headway in our relationship over the course of more than a decade, yet it advanced by leaps and bounds under her stewardship. When we formalized our relationship, Qiao Yuan shed his customary aloofness and declared tenderly, "Chu Shi, I love you." I reciprocated the sentiment in unison with her, albeit with the distinction that she was in the physical realm, while I was confined to the realm of consciousness. During our college years, she manipulated my body and embarked on a career as a freelance musician, releasing songs. With the song Sweetness Has an End, she achieved nationwide acclaim. Upon graduation, she seamlessly transitioned into a popular star, and Qiao Yuan became her manager. From the outset, she opted not to conceal our relationship and announced before a throng of reporters that she would wed Qiao Yuan when she reached the age of 23. Even though she had usurped my body and relegated me to the depths of my consciousness, I was compelled to concede that she and Qiao Yuan were an impeccable match. Like numerous netizens, I extended my felicitations to them. On numerous occasions, I mused that perhaps it would be fortuitous for her to lead a splendid life in my stead. Today marks my 23rd birthday. Qiao Yuan orchestrated a magnificent engagement ceremony. He knelt on one knee before a multitude of media, proffering a custom-designed diamond ring. "Marry him! Marry him!" Amid the clamorous cheers, I had presumed that the tale had reached a consummate conclusion, yet she abruptly vanished, and I was forcibly thrust back into control of my body. I was at a loss like a convict emerging from prison and finding myself thrust onto such a grandiose stage. I felt unworthy of this opulent platform and thus had no recourse but to flee. I staggered and shoved Qiao Yuan aside, then stumbled away from the scene. Subsequently, Qiao Yuan tracked me down and engaged in a fierce altercation with me. He averred that I had changed. Indeed, with a different soul, how could I remain unchanged? 2. I am ignorant of the reason for the woman's sudden departure, just as I am oblivious to the circumstances of her arrival. At that time I was still in high school in the prime of my youth. I was born into a family that favored sons over daughters. Since my earliest memories, my parents have never bestowed a kind countenance upon me. Loss of money. This is the phrase I heard most frequently. My parents lavished all their love on my younger brother, who was born a mere 5 minutes after me, and begrudged me a single penny. I could tolerate hunger and cold attire. On the contrary, I was cognizant that I would be bereft of support and could only rely on myself for the remainder of my life, so I studied assiduously, and my academic performance was not wanting. However, I never anticipated that, in order to economize on my college tuition, my father would choose to confine me within the house on the day of the college entrance examination and preclude me from taking the test. At that moment I was in a state of utter despair, for Qiao Yuan had once intimated that he intended to enroll in the Binhai Art University, leave this city for good, and pursue a career as a director in the future. I too aspired to attend that university and leave this city. Even if Qiao Yuan held me in contempt, I yearned to be closer to him. I frantically pounded on the door, imploring my father to release me, and even pledged to remit all the earnings from my future employment, simply to be afforded the opportunity to take the college entrance examination as normal. But my father remained deaf to my pleas and was resolute in his determination to consign me to the sweatshop he operated after that day, toiling arduously to repay his nurturing kindness of the past decade. At the nadir of my despair she arrived. Without seeking my consent, she forcibly commandeered my body, hoisted the iron bench in the room, adjusted the angle, and smashed the door open. Steady and forceful. My father was petrified at the time, observing as she controlled my body and methodically smashed the wooden door, gradually creating a gap large enough for a person to pass through unimpeded. It is difficult for me to fathom that my once arrogant father would assume such a horrified expression. I wonder what aspect of me he beheld that day to terrify him so. She successfully sat for the college entrance examination. I was apprehensive that she would struggle with the questions, but to my astonishment, she wrote with such fluency during the first math test that, regardless of the difficulty of the questions, she didn't require an additional stroke on the scratch paper. When the final results were announced, she emerged as the top scorer in the college entrance examination, ranking first in the province. When the media descended en masse upon my house in search of her, they discovered that she had not returned since the college entrance examination but had taken up residence in a 5-star hotel in the city center. After the math test, she located a black internet cafe, composed a bug feedback, and dispatched it to Microsoft, subsequently receiving a reward of $20,000, approximately 140,000 renminbi, which arrived on the same day. Unknown genius record of the top scorer of the college entrance examination in this province is an article penned by a media correspondent. I deem it highly apropos. 3. I genuinely admire her. even though she absconded with Qiao Yuan, even though she ensnared me in a darkened space, where I could only listen and watch as she wantonly squandered her prodigious talent. I also fantasized about reclaiming my body, so that I could relish the fame and fortune she had toiled for and coexist amicably with Qiao Yuan. However, after her actual departure, I discovered that matters were not as straightforward as I had imagined. I can recall every song she composed, yet I lack the ability to sing them, for I do not possess that inimitable charm. I can recollect every minutiae of her relationship with Qiao Yuan, yet every time I glimpse the reflection in his eyes, I am cognizant that he loves that woman. Even if I am physically indistinguishable from her, the essence of our souls is poles apart. The outside world was rife with speculation regarding the debacle of the engagement ceremony, and some gossipmongers began to circulate the rumor that I had spurned Qiao Yuan's proposal because I had fallen for someone else. The paparazzi even managed to obtain the video of the altercation between Qiao Yuan and me from an undisclosed source, which completely set the social media ablaze, and the related hashtag soared to the top of the Weibo trending list. Big star Chu Shi has fallen for someone else, and their 5-year relationship has reached an impasse. Truly, sweetness has an end. The prediction about Chu Shi and Qiao Yuan has come to fruition. There were a plethora of posts on the internet. Just then, Qiao Yuan paid me another visit. At this juncture, his handsome countenance was etched with weariness, and his formerly well-fitting attire now hung loosely on his frame, betraying his significant weight loss. I was deeply pained to behold him in such a state. Cici, I purchased a few carp and prepared soup to nourish your body. Qiao Yuan hoisted the bag in his hand. He refrained from mentioning the engagement, and I likewise chose not to broach the subject. I stepped aside to allow him entry. Qiao Yuan in fact possesses the key to my abode. To be precise, this is also his domicile. He entered the kitchen and commenced removing the fish scales with practiced ease. After cleansing the fish, he heated oil in a pan, fried the carp, and then added water to simmer it. She has an affinity for fish. I do not. However, I remained reticent and simply waited in silence. We sipped soup, partook of fish, and washed the dishes together. I mimicked her every gesture based on my recollections. Qiao Yuan prattled on at the dinner table, reminiscing about the Ferris wheel by the seaside, the sojourn in Dali, and the harrowing experience of being stranded in Juzhego due to the earthquake. Those were the indelible memories they had shared, and I observed from within my body, witnessing their declarations of love. Of course I remember. 4. As night descended, Qiao Yuan evinced no inclination to depart. I sat at the head of the bed in a daze. Qiao Yuan tidied the house, freshened up, and then took advantage of the situation to lift the quilt and climb into bed. I instinctively lay down as well, but turned my back to maintain a considerable distance between us. Qiao Yuan enfolded me in his embrace and inched closer. It began to rain torrentially outside. The incessant raindrops pelted the window, and then a fleeting flash of lightning illuminated the exterior, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. Qiao Yuan tightened his grip on my hand slightly. "Fear not, I am here," he murmured softly. "I am not afraid, but she is. Every time there is thunder, I can sense her shuddering uncontrollably. It is difficult to describe that sense of dread. It is akin to a primal trembling in the face of a natural predator. I cannot feign that feeling. I am apprehensive that I will be unmasked." However, Qiao Yuan failed to notice this. He reached out and turned me over, then stroked my head. Sensing his body heat, I was rendered rigid with embarrassment. What I thought to myself was that I should feign at this time and bring an end to this unrequited love that has endured for 23 years. I dared not make any extraneous movements, fearing that Qiao Yuan would detect something amiss from the slightest clue. I am still that timid and cowardly little girl. Do you desire it? Qiao Yuan's gentle voice wafted into my ear, and a pair of hands began to roam over my body. I cowered in his arms. This was an experience hitherto unknown to me. At this moment my body began to tremble, and I finally grasped how she felt when she heard the thunder. It turns out that the concept of a natural predator implies irresistibility. 5. When I awoke the following day, Qiao Yuan had departed. I have long been aware of his influence, yet I have never truly fathomed its depth. After all, there is an essential disparity between spectators and participants. There was a steaming bowl of porridge on the table, accompanied by a plate of dried fish. There was also a sticky note. Upon it was Qiao Yuan's elegant calligraphy, reminding me to attend the rehearsal for the New Year's Eve gala organized by a certain satellite TV station. I had just recollected that Qiao Yuan was my manager, and my current identity was that of a renowned star. When I contemplated the prospect of singing before tens of thousands of spectators, I was seized by a shudder that coursed through my entire being. I hastily retrieved my mobile phone and dispatched a message to Qiao Yuan. "Can the contract for the New Year's Eve gala be terminated?" After sending the message, I felt a sense of relief. Deep within my consciousness, I had envied her resplendent image on the stage and had envisioned what it would be like to stand on that stage myself. However, when the fantasy was on the verge of becoming a reality, I discovered that an overwhelming sense of trepidation welled up within me. I was concerned that the New Year's Eve gala, which was meant to be a joyous family celebration, would metamorphose into a catastrophic meltdown. A few minutes later, Qiao Yuan responded to the message. "Are you certain?" "Certain. Very well, I shall notify the TV station." Perusing Qiao Yuan's succinct reply, I was beset by a modicum of concern. After ruminating for a while, I inquired, "Is it truly acceptable to withdraw at such short notice?" Qiao Yuan replied after a few minutes, a rarity for him. "Have you forgotten? Every time you sign a contract, there is a special additional clause that permits you to withdraw at any time." Gazing at the text on the screen, I realized that I had erred due to my inattention to detail. I have not been in an optimal state recently. I truly forgot. Cancel all the contracts for the next few months. I wish to take a hiatus. I hastened to make amends. This time, Xiao Yuan replied after a protracted interval. There was but a single word. Okay. A long time ago, a reporter interviewed her, asked why she would deliberately emphasize the clause permitting withdrawal at any time during collaborations, even if it meant forgoing the opportunity to perform on the Spring Festival Gala. At that time, I regarded her as she replied gently, stating that she was apprehensive that one day, she would no longer have the inclination to sing or make public appearances. She asserted with confidence and composure that everyone has their own convictions, and hoped that all could understand. Her words have now come to pass. Point 6. The trending topic of my withdrawal from the entertainment circle once again soared to the zenith. Innumerable fans were concerned about my recent circumstances, especially when rumors circulated that I was in a predicament, compelling Xiao Yuan to liaise with the police to refute the rumors, and the public opinion finally subsided. In the evening, Xiao Yuan returned home. Although his countenance bore a tinge of fatigue, it also exhibited a modicum of rosiness. You are unaware that the major media nearly inundated my phone today. He bestowed upon me a customary embrace and then uttered in a complaining tone, "You are at liberty." I nestled in Xiao Yuan's arms, speculating about how she would respond. "Thank you for your arduous efforts, my manager." That coquettish and magnanimous demeanor was beyond my ability to imitate. Fortunately, Xiao Yuan failed to detect the flaw. He carried me to the sofa and avidly inhaled the fragrance emanating from my person. Before I could react, he recommenced caressing me. My heart was palpitating rapidly, and I hastily tugged at him and whispered, tonight, if it pleases you." Xiao Yuan promptly desisted from his actions, regarded me with astonishment, and nodded. My cheeks flushed and I diverted the topic, stating, "I have reserved a flight to Tibet, and I desire to embark on a sojourn." Upon hearing my response, Xiao Yuan narrowed his eyes and inquired, "Are you traveling alone?" I guiltily averted my gaze. Xiao Yuan immediately sat upright, his countenance fell, and he declared resolutely, "I dissent." After he had spoken, he seemed to perceive that his tone was somewhat frigid, so he extended his hand and tousled my hair, adding, "Furthermore, I am apprehensive about you undertaking a long journey unaccompanied. Can we journey together?" I was at a loss as to how to decline. Initially, I had been contemplating that I would utilize the trip as an excuse to compose myself, and deliberate on how to confront Xiao Yuan. Do not accede to him. I exhorted myself inwardly, yet when the words reached the tip of my tongue I said, "Very well." Xiao Yuan summarily rejected all my contracts within the next 3 months, and then engaged with great enthusiasm in researching the itinerary to Tibet. "Cici, we can embark on a self-driving tour. Did you not previously express a longing to visit Mount Everest? I shall assume the role of the driver." "Mount Everest? Oh, I recollect now. She has indeed yearned for this pinnacle of the world for an extended period." 7. Prior to the journey, I surreptitiously slipped out while Xiao Yuan was preoccupied with preparations and contacted Shui Yuanqi. He was my high school deskmate and is presently employed in a mental hospital. I have heard that he attained the position of director at a youthful age. During the phone conversation, I stated that I was beset by certain mental quandaries that I required his counsel on, yet I was disinclined to visit the hospital, thus I implored him to meet me outside. He consented and selected a tea house as the rendezvous. That establishment was owned by his comrade, and would be closed to the public on that day. Consequently, I swathed myself in layers and drove to the designated location. Shui Yuanqi remonstrated about my appearance the moment I entered. "Big star, are you despondent?" A jest reminded me of the days when we bickered in high school. I divested myself of my scarf and sunglasses and rolled my eyes at him. "I am a big star now, leading a felicitous life. How could I be despondent?" Shui Yuanqi remarked nonchalantly, "The waters in your entertainment industry are exceedingly turbid, and there are numerous stars afflicted with psychological ailments. Moreover, your recent amorous entanglement with Xiao Yuan has dominated the trending list. If you aver that you are depressed, I would believe it." Upon hearing Xiao Yuan's name, I emitted a faint sigh, seated myself on the chair, and proceeded directly to the crux of the matter. "I suspect that I am afflicted with split personality." "Split personality? Suspect." Shui Yuanqi's visage underwent a transformation, and he immediately straightened his posture and spoke gravely. "What precisely is transpiring? Enlighten me." I was neither evasive nor equivocal, omitting certain details regarding the occupation of my body during the college entrance examination, and then related the events. Confessing to Shui Yuanqi was a determination I reached after protracted deliberation. What had befallen me was overly bizarre, and I required the counsel of a professional, and this professional had to be someone I could trust implicitly and who was sufficiently discreet. After due consideration, Shui Yuanqi was the sole suitable candidate. The 3 years of acquaintance in high school had instilled in me a sense of trust in him. 8. Big star, are you certain that you are not jesting with me? Shui Yuanqi furrowed his brow after listening to my narrative. He elucidated to me, multiple personalities are one of the manifestations of split personality, yet if you are the primary personality, you will be oblivious to the existence of the secondary personality. That sensation is analogous to sleepwalking. Furthermore, the manifestation of split personality is extremely volatile. It is excessive to assert that the secondary personality has persisted for 5 years. I was rendered speechless upon hearing this. After listening to his remarks, it did not appear that I was afflicted with split personality, yet how was I to account for her existence? Shui Yuanqi regarded me and all of a sudden, curved his lips and raised his hand pensively. Nevertheless, there is also a possibility. What possibility? I inquired. Both you and the stranger are secondary personalities, thus you are cognizant of each other's experiences, and your genuine primary personality, Chu Shi, may have lapsed into a profound slumber. Shui Yuanqi abruptly arose, fixing me with an intense gaze and queried, "Speak, are you Chu Shi?" I must confess that I was utterly panic-stricken. Am I merely a secondary personality? Wherein lies the primary personality? Puff! Who could have anticipated that in the next instant, Shui Yuanqi would burst into laughter, raise his hand and tweak my nose. "You are still as gullible as ever. Do you believe this?" Huh. I was dumbfounded and witnessed Shui Yuanqi commence his explanation anew. "You are not afflicted with schizophrenia, at least not the ordinary variety. I can vouch for this. However, she truly exists. I am certain of it." I hastened to elucidate. "I am cognizant of that." Shui Yuanqi suddenly stood up and stated placidly, "I ascertained after the college entrance examination that she does exist, yet it does not imply that this is schizophrenia. What has befallen you cannot be explicated by science. Although such occurrences are not legion, they do objectively exist." I remained silent for a moment and then raised my head and asked, "Is there no means of retrieving her? Why do you desire to retrieve her?" Shui Yuanqi regarded me with a quizzical expression. "You are Chu Shi. You are the proprietor of your body. She is merely a transient visitor." "But," I hesitated, "but she is the big star, and Qiao Yuan is enamored of her." Shui Yuanqi shook his head slightly and offered consolation. "Your mental state is presently highly stable. Since she has departed, she will likely not return. You can lead a fulfilling life and relish everything she has wrought for you. Merely consider these as the recompense for her leasing your body." I muttered this word and then regarded Shui Yuanqi and said, "I comprehend. Thank you." Then I swathed myself in layers once more and readied myself to depart. The moment I opened the door, Shui Yuanqi suddenly sighed. "If you are truly desirous of locating her, you can contact me for hypnosis. It may prove ineffective. However, this is the sole recourse I can conceive of." I halted and experienced an impulse to immediately embrace hypnosis, yet ultimately I remained silent. I thanked him once again and took my leave. I advanced to the threshold of the tea house and suddenly had the perception that I was being observed. I raised my head and beheld Shui Yuanqi standing at the window, regarding me in silence. Shui Yuanqi detected that I was observing him and waved his hand. At that moment, the tacit understanding cultivated over the years enabled me to fathom his meaning. He did not desire me to seek him out again. 9. Tibet is a hallowed land. It is sparsely populated and graced with resplendent scenery. In order to ingratiate himself with me, Qiao Yuan had undertaken copious preparatory work and purchased a multifunctional recreational vehicle to enhance the comfort of the journey. I was also highly sensible and endeavored to emulate her every gesture, even the intonation of her speech. Gradually, I could sense that I was becoming increasingly similar to her. At times, even without conscious thought, I could mimic some of her allure. Confident and composed, the rapport between Qiao Yuan and me was also growing warmer. I even had a premonition that Qiao Yuan was on the verge of proposing to me on several occasions. Although he ultimately refrained from doing so, I simply had that intuition. I had reached a resolution. As long as he broached the subject this time, I would acquiesce. Being able to wed Qiao Yuan and cohabit in the future was the life I had perpetually dreamt of. Regrettably, he never took the initiative to propose. I was not impatient and savored the scenery of the journey. Qiao Yuan and I proceeded at a leisurely pace, frequently parking the recreational vehicle by the roadside, then erecting a tent and gazing at the boundless prairie to unwind. Qiao Yuan pledged that if I took a liking to this mode of life, he would escort me on a global tour in the future. After all, with our savings, we need not concern ourselves about pecuniary matters in this lifetime. At that moment, my heart was thumping wildly, and I directly kissed Qiao Yuan. Even in Tibet, I still had fans. Whenever I passed through towns and villages, there would invariably be individuals who recognized me. The fact that Qiao Yuan and I were traveling in tandem had also disseminated across the internet. The previous series of rumors that I had fallen for someone else naturally dissipated. I was not pretentious and directly chronicled our journey on my blog. After netizens learned that Qiao Yuan and I had galloped on horseback across the prairie, they christened us a celestial couple. That night, I smiled and presented Qiao Yuan with the comments of netizens. After perusing them, he hoisted me aloft with a complacent grin adorning his visage. You perceive, netizens deem us a match made in heaven. 10. Several days later, Qiao Yuan and I arrived at the base camp, which is a direct distance of 19 kilometers from the summit of Mount Everest. We are ordinary mortals and lack the requisite qualifications to ascend Mount Everest. I shall conduct you on a tour tomorrow, Qiao Yuan explicated to me. I nodded to signify my comprehension. In truth, I did not possess an intense fixation on scaling Mount Everest, yet she was enamored of challenges and had always harbored the aspiration to reach the pinnacle. It is of utmost importance to know one's limitations. Ascending Mount Everest is an especially perilous endeavor, and I did not harbor much confidence. We can attempt some rudimentary rock climbing in the future. Once we obtain professional certifications, I shall accompany you once more. Qiao Yuan seemed somewhat contrite, pointing to the towering mountains in the distance and stating, I pledged to you that I would escort you to the summit. Yes, Qiao Yuan had indeed made this promise to her. I was somewhat ennui-stricken and contrived a faint smile on my countenance. Very well, I believe you. Then I turned my head to regard Mount Everest. The weather was exceptionally fine at that moment, and I could behold the entire panorama of Mount Everest. The precipitous cliffs instilled a sense of trepidation in me. Such a peak is best admired from a distance. The Everest Base Camp is the terminus for many tourists and the starting point for numerous mountaineering expeditions. Consequently, the infrastructure here is relatively complete with hotels, restaurants, and medical clinics. This also implies that we no longer need to reside in the recreational vehicle. Xiao Yuan had reserved a star hotel in advance and astutely selected a king-size bedchamber. In the past, in order to accommodate my celebrity status, he would essentially book 2 rooms whenever we traveled. However, now that netizens across the nation are aware that we are cohabiting in Tibet, there is no necessity for concealment. I believe that even if the paparazzi divulged the news, no one would take umbrage. After 5 years of a long-distance relationship, compounded by the impending engagement, who would deem it inappropriate? Perhaps due to the fatigue of the journey, Xiao Yuan retired earlier than customary and enfolded me in his embrace and promptly succumbed to slumber. I was beset by insomnia. As we had arrived at Mount Everest, this would be the final stop of our journey. We would soon return to Binhai City, and Xiao Yuan and I needed to expeditiously finalize our nuptials. Should I marry Xiao Yuan? Ding! Just as I was vacillating between hope and apprehension, Xiao Yuan's phone received a message and emitted a ringtone. This was not his work account, and messages received at this hour are often of greater significance. I retrieved the phone and unlocked the screen with my fingerprint, and beheld the content of the message. Are you truly not going to propose? When I beheld the message, I felt a chill permeate my entire being. I swiftly clicked on the avatar and scrolled upward. It was a message from Xiao Qian, who was Xiao Yuan's bosom friend. They had been comrades since childhood and shared an extraordinary bond. 11. The content of the chat history left me in a state of bewilderment. Xiao Qian. The picture was initially merely a screenshot dispatched by Xiao Qian to Xiao Yuan. It was the one beneath my blog where netizens commented that we were an ideal couple. Xiao Qian, congratulations. Have you mended your relationship? Xiao Yuan. I presume so. Xiao Qian. Then when do you intend to get engaged anew? The Chinese New Year is nigh. After 2 or 3 hours, Xiao Yuan responded once more. I am uncertain. I sense that Chu Qian appears somewhat dissimilar. Xiao Qian different? Has she truly fallen for someone else? Impossible. Xiao Yuan. It is not a matter of falling for someone else. It pertains to a feeling. I perceive that she is not the same as before. Xiao Qian. Elder brother, desist from jesting. Tell me the truth. Could it be that you have developed feelings for another? Xiao Yuan. I have not engaged in conversation with the opposite sex for a month. How could I fall for someone else? It is simply that there is something amiss with Cici. I cannot fathom what is awry. Xiao Qian. People are wont to change. The cells in the human body are in a perpetual state of metabolism. From a biological perspective, they are supplanted every 6 to 7 years. Hence, it is not unfounded that everyone speaks of the 7-year itch. Xiao Yuan. You fail to comprehend. Xiao Qian, do not overthink. Simply inform me, do you still hold affection for Chuxi? If so, I shall organize another engagement ceremony for you, and I vow that it shall be more resplendent than the last. Xiao Yuan did not reply. Until today, perhaps because Xiao Qian observed that we were on the verge of returning to Binhai City, he dispatched a message to inquire once again. After perusing the message, I was unable to calm my agitated state of mind for an extended period. Haha, pretense is pretense. Even though I believed that I had exerted great effort to mimic her words and deeds during the journey, it was still ersatz. I placed the phone aside, pivoted, and regarded Xiao Yuan. He was still slumbering soundly. At this moment, I was suddenly seized by an impulse to rouse Xiao Yuan instantaneously, confront him, and query whether he desired to wed me. However, after protracted deliberation, I ultimately refrained from doing so. Xiao Yuan's lack of response had already elucidated the answer. What difference would it make if I inquired once more? Even if he avowed that he would marry me, could I truly feign to be her for the remainder of my life without leaving a single trace? I could not even maintain the pretense for the duration of a few months' travel. I am unaware of when the tears began to stream. I closed my eyes, yet all that came to mind were the affectionate daily vignettes between her and Xiao Yuan. Even during the period when I was awake, it was still all her conduct. From commencement to conclusion, Xiao Yuan and I did not possess any love story. I cannot be her. At this juncture, I realized this with pellucid clarity. I wept copiously upon the bed, yet I refrained from making any audible sound. Since I had awakened, I had been striving with all my might to impersonate her, yet it transpired that all was in vain. The pent-up grievances erupted at this moment. Finally, the heavens were overcast, and after an entire night of torment, I reached a resolution. Retrieve her. Let her lead this life on my behalf and take meticulous care of Xiao Yuan for me. As long as he is content, I do not concern myself. After all, were it not for her, I would likely have been dispatched to the factory by my father to toil, and ultimately spend the remainder of my life in indigence and misery. Facing the faint glimmer of light, I silently retrieved my phone and tapped on Shui Yuanqi's profile picture. I shall seek you out upon my return to Binhai City. Shui Yuanqi replied instantaneously. Are you certain? Do not reconsider. I am certain. I also replied promptly. After dispatching the message, in order to forestall any regrets, I promptly powered off the phone. The instant the screen darkened, I espied a pair of eyes. Xiao Yuan's eyes. I swiveled around in haste, only to discover that Xiao Yuan had awakened unbeknownst to me. In the inky darkness of the night, he regarded me with an intense gaze, replete with astonishment and perplexity. Inexplicably, I felt my heart shatter anew. 12. Shuiyunji. He was your desk mate in high school. Xiao Yuan uttered hoarsely. In an instant, I was cognizant that Xiao Yuan had misconstrued the situation and hastened to elucidate. Xiao Yuan, it is not as you presume. Oh. Xiao Yuan stared at me impassively, extended his hand to wipe away my tears and retorted, what then do you suppose? I was momentarily rendered speechless, ruminating on the conversation with Shui Yuanqi. In the dead of night and after weeping, anyone would entertain such thoughts. How would she have accounted for it if it were she? I subconsciously commenced cogitating, yet soon, I shook my head with a rueful smile. If it were she, such an occurrence would never have transpired at all. Why bother to explain? I remained silent for a moment, retrieved Xiao Yuan's mobile phone, and summoned the chat history between him and Xiao Qian. At this moment, I sensed that Xiao Yuan's demeanor instantly softened, and he blurted out, Cici, it is not as you think. Before he could complete his utterance, he was petrified on the spot. I had articulated this very sentence a second ago. I sighed deeply. Xiao Yuan, I am unable to offer you an explanation. I can only inform you that allow me to seek out Shui Yuanqi. If all proceeds smoothly, I shall return promptly. At that time we shall wed as planned. I shall not withdraw from the entertainment industry, and we shall continue to revert to our previous life trajectory. Nothing will be altered. I give you my word. Xiao Yuan was stupefied. He regarded me in a daze and inquired after a protracted interval, what if all does not proceed favorably? I shook my head and remained silent. In contrast to the intermittent progress on the outbound journey, Xiao Yuan and I scarcely paused on the return leg. We hastened all the way. The atmosphere between us was highly strained. In his eyes, I was a woman engaged in duplicity and on the verge of making a choice. And I was aware that upon my return to Haiban City, I would likely relapse into the depths of my consciousness and cede my body and life to her, whom I had never encountered. This time I would not wish to awaken for a single instant. If given a choice, I would not desire to return. Who would relish being ensnared in the depths of consciousness? Regrettably, how could there be a means to have the best of both worlds, to neither disappoint one's youth nor let down one's beloved? Xiao Yuan drove with a frigid countenance, while I gazed out of the window. When traversing a perilous area, I espied a slogan. There are myriad roads, yet safety reigns supreme. If you drive erratically, your loved ones will weep. I suddenly recollected that Xiao Yuan had been driving for an entire day and night, and I was on the verge of admonishing him not to drive when fatigued. However, in the next moment, I beheld a yak abruptly darting out from the roadside. Xiao Yuan also caught sight of it and slammed on the brakes. The RV overturned. I felt dizzy and instantly lost consciousness. 13 When I regained consciousness once more, the surroundings were eerily quiet. I swiftly pivoted my head to regard the driver's seat. The spectacle simply plunged me into despair. I beheld Xiao Yuan slumped against the steering wheel with blood upon his head. Xiao Yuan, awaken. I hastily unfastened my seat belt, reached out to straighten the man, and patted his cheek in an attempt to rouse him. Alas, I patted him for an extended period, yet he failed to respond in the slightest. I trembled and used my fingers to ascertain Xiao Yuan's breath. Thank heavens he was still breathing. The entire RV had capsized to the left. I labored to open the door and then painstakingly extricated Xiao Yuan bit by bit. The weather in Tibet at this time of year is somewhat chilly, so I promptly returned to the RV and retrieved food, fresh water, and bedding. Then I tore the spare clothes into strips, soaked them with alcoholic beverages, and bandaged Xiao Yuan's head wound. After accomplishing all of this, I felt a modicum of relief, and a sense of fatigue washed over me. However, now is not the time to rest. The route we had driven was National Highway 219. Regrettably, it was not the peak tourist season in Tibet, and it was late so few vehicles passed by. Xiao Yuan's condition brooked no delay. I compelled myself to return to the cab once more and scoured for my phone for an extended period, yet the screen was shattered into fragments and could not be powered on. Just as I was at a loss, I suddenly heard Xiao Yuan's voice. Shishi. I hurriedly clambered out of the cab and beheld Xiao Yuan laboriously turning around. I am here, Xiao Yuan. You must persevere. Do not succumb to slumber at present. I rushed to Xiao Yuan's side, conversed with him, and held his hand to prevent him from rising. Xiao Yuan's countenance barely managed to muster a smile, and his tone was exceedingly gentle. Cici, I love you. I know. I love you too. I had already dissolved into tears. If I do not survive, do not concern yourself about me. You possess experience in wilderness survival. Retrace your steps along this road. I recall that there is a village 10 kilometers hence, Xiao Yuan said with great effort. I was dumbfounded upon hearing this. Experience in wilderness survival? Do I have such a thing? However, I witnessed Xiao Yuan laboriously raise his hand, caress my cheek and enunciate feebly. Just as when we were marooned in Jizhegu, you can reach there. At this moment I remembered that she was truly proficient in wilderness survival. Whether it was kindling a fire by drilling wood or determining the direction, she was an adept. But, do not concern yourself about me. Xiao Yuan observed me standing there, pushed me with his hand and continued, you must survive. Gazing at Xiao Yuan's moribund state, I could no longer contain myself. Xiao Yuan, I am not she. Truly I am not. I cannot manage it. Allow me to remain by your side. Even if we perish, we shall do so together. You must persevere. I require you. I wept uncontrollably, yet Xiao Yuan did not respond for an extended period. I raised my head and beheld that he had closed his eyes. 14. Xiao Yuan and I were ultimately rescued. That night I huddled beside Xiao Yuan and finally espied a passing vehicle. I had not sustained severe injuries, yet Xiao Yuan was slow to regain consciousness due to the impact on his head. The physician averred that he had exerted his utmost. I believe that the sole recourse available to me was to transfer Qiao Yuan to the preeminent hospital in Binhai City. After a consultation with experts, he was diagnosed with an irreversible coma, that is, a vegetative state. There was a glimmer of hope for his awakening, yet the duration of the coma remained indeterminate. It could be a matter of a few days or an interminable number of years. I had heard that the brainstem of a vegetative individual still functions and can receive external sounds. Although they may not comprehend them, they become more attuned upon being stimulated by certain stimuli. I thought of her. If she were to return, there would be a solution, would there not? With this sentiment, I proceeded to visit Shui Yuanqi. She is not within your corporeal form. Shui Yuanqi wearily placed his pocket watch aside and slumped into his chair. What do you mean? I immediately became apprehensive and inquired hastily. I have hypnotized you on numerous occasions, including the most profound trance, yet I was unable to detect any vestige of her within either your subconscious or conscious mind. Shui Yuanqi removed his spectacles, walked to the window, regarded the RV that had been parked downstairs for 3 days and 3 nights and sighed. She truly cannot return. How could this be? I murmured, and in my mind's eye, I recollected that she had pledged to Qiao Yuan that she would remain by his side until the end of time. At that juncture, I was ensconced deep within my consciousness and could distinctly sense her resoluteness when she uttered those words. And yet the outcome was thus? Departing without bidding farewell? Are there any alternative means? I am willing to cooperate provided that I can retrieve her. I inquired once more, clutching at a straw of hope. Shui Yuanqi shook his head helplessly. Your situation is highly singular. I can assure you that we will never locate her. If she can truly return, it must be of her own volition. I am ignorant of the principle, the timing, the location, or even whether she will manifest again. Scientifically, we are bereft of knowledge regarding human consciousness. There are an excessive number of inexplicable phenomena. Shui Yuanqi was replete with a sense of helplessness at this moment and sighed. My apologies. I am unable to assist you. I feigned a smile and walked to the window, regarding the fallen leaves outside, and mused aloud. What of Qiao Yuan? I am truly sorry. Shui Yuanqi glanced at me and offered solace. Perhaps he will awaken after a while. I shook my head slightly, my countenance suffused with bitterness. For a time, Shui Yuanqi and I remained silent. Perhaps I could attempt once more. Shui Yuanqi suddenly proposed. According to your account, she emerged when you were confined within the room by your father. We could endeavor to reconstruct the scene at that time. What is the likelihood of retrieving her? I am uncertain, yet it is worth a try. Shui Yuanqi shrugged, stroked his glasses and continued. If it still proves futile, then we can only await. I deliberated for a moment and ultimately raised my head. I uttered but a single sentence. If there is a prospect, let us attempt it. I regarded the man before me, that is, my father. It did not require excessive effort to persuade him to confine me and reconstruct the scene prior to the college entrance examination. Initially, he suspected that I intended to entrap him and adamantly refused. However, after I proffered a substantial sum of money as a recompense, he immediately acquiesced. At that time, he grinned and remarked that my brother was on the verge of matrimony, and that the woman was demanding a hefty bride price. I was entirely indifferent to this. Among the numerous deeds she had accomplished, I was content with but 2. One was to win Qiao Yuan's heart. The second was to sever ties with my original family. Subsequently, my father cooperated in reconstructing the scene at that time. I was incarcerated within the room, trembling. Regrettably, she did not make an appearance this time. 15. Qiao Yuan remained in a comatose state. During this period, at Shui Yuanqi's behest, I commenced traveling the world alone. I embarked on learning wilderness survival skills and scaled Mount Everest on multiple occasions, harboring the aspiration to reach its summit. These were her dreams. I conjectured that perhaps after all this, she would return and rouse Qiao Yuan. During my peregrinations, Shui Yuanqi maintained contact with me, and I implored him to take excellent care of Qiao Yuan on my behalf. On this day, I was in Switzerland preparing to ascend the Matterhorn. In terms of difficulty, this mountain is only marginally more challenging than Mount Everest. If I could successfully conquer it, my next objective would be Mount Everest. It could be regarded as practice. Before my departure, I suddenly received a parcel. It was dispatched by Shui Yuanqi. Its contents were not copious, consisting solely of a CD. Some time ago, he had solicited my authorization for numerous songs, stating that a director in China required them. I naturally consented. Since my return from Tibet, I had completely withdrawn from the entertainment industry, yet I still received a steady stream of copyright income, which was substantial. Qiao Yuan had once expressed his aspiration to become a director. Recalling this, I felt a trifle dejected, inserted the disc into the DVD, and initiated playback. Familiar music resounded, and this director had selected the song with which I had made my debut as the opening theme. Sweetness has an end. I must concede that this song was truly remarkable under her rendition. With a tinge of sentimentality, I commenced watching the film. This was a love story. It recounted the tale of the male and female protagonists. After falling in love, the female protagonist abruptly transformed into a stranger, which precipitated a crisis in their relationship. There was no third party involved. It was merely an inexplicable alteration. When I beheld this, I felt that the premise was familiar. When I compared myself with Qiao Yuan, I discovered that they were astonishingly analogous. This rendered me highly engrossed while watching. The tempo of the movie was brisk. I witnessed the male and female protagonists interacting awkwardly until the conclusion. The denouement was that the male protagonist accompanied the female protagonist on their final journey, Yet on the return trip from scaling Mount Everest, an avalanche suddenly ensued. The male protagonist astonishingly bared his heart at the last moment, revealing that he had actually fallen in love with the female protagonist long ago. It had commenced when he was pursuing her in their childhood. Subsequently, the transformation of the female protagonist compelled him to re-examine his feelings and discover that regardless of how the female protagonist had changed, his love remained immutable. It was an exceedingly poignant script. I wept copiously until the closing credits began to roll and the production team's information emerged. In the next instant, my eyes widened. I beheld the director's credit, which read, Xiao Yuan. Just as I was astounded, there was a rap on the door. A familiar voice rang out, Cece, marry me. I hastened to open the door and beheld Xiao Yuan outside, clutching a diamond ring and kneeling on one knee. Behind him were Shui Yuanqi, Xiao Qian, and a large assemblage of the mountaineering team observing the spectacle. I rushed over frantically and embraced Xiao Yuan, fearing that this was all a figment of my imagination. The robust arms enfolded me once more after many years. Xiao Yuan retrieved the identical chocolate that I had bestowed upon him that year from his bosom and proffered it to my lips. Cece, I love you now. 16. Subsequently, Xiao Yuan and I naturally entered into wedlock. At that time, he had already established himself as a renowned new director in China. He had but a single work, the one he had sent me, and he had titled it Endless Sweetness. It grossed 6 billion yuan at the box office, reduced countless men and women to tears, and promptly became an internet sensation. The story of Xiao Yuan and me was once again presented to the public. He averred that in comparison to a diminutive diamond ring, this was the token of his love for me. Our married life was blissful in the extreme. When Xiao Yuan was not engaged in filming, he would invariably be by my side. Soon I became enceinte. During childbirth, I entered an anesthetized state, yet my consciousness did not lapse into oblivion but was transported to a palace. The palace of memory. Within the palace was a letter that she had left for me. Cece, I am uncertain when you will peruse this missive. However, you should have wed Xiao Yuan, should you not? Permit me to offer my congratulations. I am cognizant that you harbor numerous queries, yet fret not. Listen attentively as I elucidate. Do you still recall the night when you were chastised at the age of 5? I originated from that day. At that time, you achieved a score of 130 points higher than your brother. However, when you brought the test paper home, your inebriated father chastised you. From that moment on, you voluntarily relinquished your talent. This gave rise to me. I am an unstable personality, endowed with the learning aptitude that you forsook. I initially had no raison d'etre, yet the longer I lingered within your consciousness, the more I felt compelled to assist you. Forgive my impetuosity. I could not idly stand by and witness you continue in your timidity. Thus I commandeered your body. I aided you in winning Xiao Yuan's heart, and accomplished many feats with your talent. However, I am not the principal personality after all and am inherently unstable. I could sense this whenever there was thunder, and thus I resolved to return your body to you prior to my dissipation. You merit a more felicitous life, and I trust that my impetuosity will not have caused you excessive tribulation. This memory palace is replete with my knowledge, encompassing singing skills, programming acumen, and numerous other proficiencies. These were all acquired by me by virtue of your talent, and now they have reverted to their rightful owner. You must lead a fulfilling life and live doubly so on my behalf. Incidentally, I actually bestowed a name upon myself. Dura loves you. Your split personality. Cece, behold how adorable our daughter is. I reopened my eyes and Xiao Yuan was standing beside me. Suddenly, his joyous expression vanished, and he extended his hand to wipe away my tears. His tone was tender. Why are you weeping? End of the full text.